Good morning, my friends. November 13th, 2021, here from Hawaii. Hope you're well, wherever you may be. Today is part 4 in this series, the Dharma Life, Lessons I'm Learning, Pitfalls, Blindspots, along this wild adventure of being alive, human, in this time frame here on Earth. Today's sharing about loss, despair, and grieving, an epic topic. There's no one exempt from those emotions, loss, despair, and grieving. And I struggled a bit with the subtitle, but there it is, the Dharma Alchemy of turning, I dare even use these words, the darkness into light, but there it goes. And isn't that the religion of existence? Is to wake up and encounter the inevitable, no matter who, where, what, whatever form it may be. There is loss. I would assume there are the emotions of despair and grieving. I wouldn't be surprised that even the plants, the soil, the oxygen, the air, the rocks, the sun, the stars, the beat of every heart everywhere in this galaxy called infinity has in some way embedded in it the innate spirit molecule of loss, of grieving, and potentially of despair, and in some cases irreconcilable, irretrievable depression. Epic forms of sadness. We all know it. We've seen it in the movies. We've seen it on the news. We've traveled the world. We know it among our friends and our family. We know that we've had our own encounters with difficulty and complexity, and we know that we're not exempt from them continuing. And so here we sit, just a spontaneous, short sharing from my heart to yours. Thank you for being part of my life. The risk of opening ourselves, the risk of love, the risk of trust, the risk of exploring safety, closeness, the risk of being more and more human, being more outbound with our feelings, the risk to overcome our separation, the risk to challenge our unrecognized or recognizable pride, the risk to, I want to use the word eviscerate, arrogance, and narcissism, inevitably brings us closer to both ourselves and to each other and to the innate vulnerability of being alive in a world of interdependent phenomena, oxygen, nutrient, light, the innate vulnerability of being in this encapsulated photonic 7-mile-high, oxygen-infused, light, luminous sphere around our planet. The inevitabilities of not having what we want or need at the time that we want it or need it. The inevitabilities of being close in intimate proximity to a lover, a pet, the trust in mobility, in time, in perception, and out of anywhere, not out of nowhere, but out of anywhere, the classic Buddhist Pali word, anicca, evanescence, impermanence, and the classic Buddhist Pali word anatta. Not only the emptiness of self, but the inability to control the phenomenology of our embeddedness in this form, in this context. Obviously, we cannot simply tell the future to provide for us in the way that we want, to protect us from the asteroid of the unexpected. And so we are confronted inside and outside, again, to state the obvious, with inevitables that are beyond whatever the I means inside of us and outside of us control. And so loss and despair and grieving and even forms of depression, I want to use the word epic depression. There's something in the process for me in the Dharma Alchemy to keep fostering what's the essence, the soul of Dharma, the courageous willingness of heart and soul and mind and body to keep on bringing light into the complexity and infusing that darkness with something holy, with something sacred. Where I invite you to invite me, to invite our friends, do we honor the emotion of reverence to the circumstances of living, where reverential engagement is a priority over continuity of proximity. I love you, but I reverentially honor the fact that anatta and anicca and inevitably dukkha, these three classic characteristics of existence and phenomena, are beyond however I anoint myself called I. Whatever my identity is, I identity cannot control existence more than just a modicum. And even so, inevitably, by birth, however long we want to call it, there will be the inevitable collapse of biological ability, the loss of mobility, the loss of perception, the loss of smell, the loss of taste, the loss of sight, the loss of memory, the loss of proximity, the loss of mobility, the loss of belonging, loss. Innate in the phenomenology of existence, there is the inability to control and therefore the perception of loss. And so I bring up this early on in the sharing to provide the context in a way where all living beings, you and me and all of us, and this and that and everything that we've ever known or unknown or imagined, life is embedded in anicca, anatta, and dukkha. I cannot emphasize enough how important those three, I want to use the word concept, those three phenomena, those three characteristics, the nutrients of drinking and oxygenating, whatever the word wisdom means to you, oxygenating your wisdom. I'm in love with you, you're in love with me. We are now in the safety of a love net. But at the same time, the reverential sacredness that I can't control you, I can't even control me most of the time. You can't control you and you can't control me and we can't control the context. And so we must anoint. Blessed are those who anoint shared space with the sacred vocation of transformational awakening. There's the alchemy, right? And I want to pause here and to do everything that we possibly can in our lifetime to take the language of love and life and freedom and God and holiness and make them so intimate to the fabric of our entirety. Yes, that's a very strong pledge. To make wisdom so innate to the fabric of our totality that the priority over anything in life is the wisdom relationship with it than the continuity of a kind of adolescent perception that I can keep something and only deal with the inevitables when it disappears. Innately, everything passes. But how much more interesting it becomes to understand that nothing can be held. Therefore, my love for you must be tempered by the sacred vocation of trust, openness, giving, all the qualities that keep elevating freedom of heart, a freedom to love rather than a bonded attachment to love. And I'm not saying one or the other or either or. It's a lifelong journey, to state the obvious. Out of nowhere, something that we've always known along intuitively, separation occurs. It's not as if it just happens, right? And could there be anything more epically problematic to the human heart and soul than to have to deal with rejection and the innate deep trauma based upon this deep love of other and the familiarity of that proximity of intimacy? And it's like your skin, your psychic skin, has just been ripped off of you. And rejection and loss and despair and grieving, how many people I've known, how many times in my own life I've dealt with the unwanted. And yes, in retrospect, we can look back and it's always 2020 as the cliche goes, but yet lessons are hard to learn. And we keep on trusting, we keep on loving, we keep on pushing, and we find ourselves in more and more intimate circumstances with either degrees of callousness or scars of trauma. And we love in the way that we dangle the intimacy of this and that. But I ask myself over and over again, my goodness, here the young people are talking about no future. It's one thing to lose the various things that we lose as humans in the vicinity of our family, our love, our homes, our trust, our jobs, our mobilities, even our biological right to choose what's good for us. And here we're dealing with the potential, the likelihood of a catastrophic environmental collapse based upon me, my behaviors that are blindly unrecognized. All of us, as it's been said, have our foot on the gas pedal of denial as we consume and we consume and we consume, and electrification keeps keeping things brighter and brighter and more interconnected until eventually Facebook turns into a metaverse, and all of a sudden we've illuminated the sky of our denial so thoroughly we're deep in to the sixth great extinction. And there's no ads to sell there. Death on the planet, death to most species, death to the predominant number of human beings. And yes, maybe something will be reborn from it, but there'll be an epic winter called epic darkness. Dharma alchemy. There's so many levels to this. The Buddha was said to have said in one obscure discourse that there were 4 types of people. There are those who run from darkness to darkness. There are those who run from brightness to darkness. There are those who run from darkness to lightness, and there are those who run from brightness to brightness. Darkness to darkness, brightness to darkness, darkness to lightness, and brightness to brightness. And I bring this up because we're in a spectrum, if you will. It's the way I see this Dharma alchemy process. In the early days, as teenagers or young adults, there's a naivete. Very few people are born into wisdom and classical insight, into seeing things as impermanent. There'll be proclivities, no doubt. But we gradually learn the Dharma alchemy based upon that very rare ignition of the human heart to want to transform the struggle into something more lasting than the continuity of a blindness being repeated over and over again. And so we learn from our so-called losses and our moments of grieving and depression. And I've even anointed my own, blood-laden, tear-laden journey with the wisdom of depression, the wisdom of loss, the wisdom of despair. Because right there, that ability of the human mind, the word Dharma, to me, points fundamentally to an individual who has a very high conviction, hear me, in wanting to transform darkness, not into darkness. I don't want to run from darkness to darkness. I want to run from darkness to lightness. Not from brightness to darkness. Not from brightness to brightness alone. That's a very rare individual. Yes, I want to live there too. But by and large, from darkness, degrees of darkness, into luminosity. Getting turned on to freedom, freedom of mind, disobedience to the loyalty of conditions of confinement, growing fond of the music that liberates my conformity into expected behaviors of speech and thought, to conform to the 7 to 7, to the 9 to 5, to the corporate cubicle of a religion called loot and money over the sanctity of the soul. And you go, wow, freedom rocks. Freedom of expression is the lifeblood of our civilization. Take away the right to express the truth of your heart and mind and sing and dream, and you try to crucify the Jesus and the Mary and the God and the Buddha and the Allah and the freedom from the soul of the individual. We don't want to be our own enemy. Thus, the Dharma is the individual who has resurrected from the darkness the desire, in my humble opinion, to want to bring light to that darkness. I want to learn to love you. I want to learn and understand the mistakes that I've made in the relationship that just ended on terms that were not agreed upon. Yes, you promised me transparency. You promised me honesty. You promised me safety. We had all sets of guidelines in place. We were spiritual beings. We had never been so open. We have never been so gifted. And yet, how did the betrayal happen? Was it based upon some unrecognized, convenient trauma of the past? Or was it an ethical lapse of not really having the courage to develop moral awakening along the journey? I don't want to attribute your inability to be honest to some trauma. Lots of people live with the scars of trauma unhealed, yet have radical, ethical, moral courage. And yet I don't want to fall into being a victim of my own inability to have moral courage. The courage to transform, moral courage, spiritual courage, existential courage, Dharma Alchemy. I would only encourage you here 3 ways through. If the words Dharma and alchemy mean something to you, rather than following the Buddhist Four Noble Truths alone, which are reasonable to follow and to inhabit, no doubt, but what does the word alchemy mean to you on a practical basis? And what does the word Dharma mean to you, Alan, on a very practical basis, so that we do all that we possibly can to no longer fall in conformity and love patterns with a narcissist? I don't really want to go down the aisle of love bombing And I don't want to go down the road of chemistry, right? How easy it is to be moved by these atmospheres that are unrecognized in self until we understand not only Dharma alchemy, but the ability of radical discernment when chemistry begins to arise. The chemistry of toxicity, the chemistry of negativity, the chemistry of denigration, the chemistry of darkness. There's something very passionate and sexy and erotic about going down the road of mutual toxicity. Two narcissists in the same house, they get along really, really well until one gets more influences than the other. And all of a sudden, the serpent comes out. Next thing you know, that dictator goes to prison. And you're the very one who gave me the dictatorial role. Look at Burma. Tan Shui anointed by Ne Win. Tan Shui puts Ne Win in jail. Ming Online, you got there based on Tan Shui. You better soon put Tan Shui in jail, or guess what? Someone's going to take your role sooner than you think. The darkness and the darkness leads to the darkness. Who wants to go from darkness to darkness like Tan Shui, like Ming Online, like Xi Jinping, like Biden, like Fauci, like so many people throughout history? And right here, as I come to the end, there are so many good people right now that are dealing with epic despair. Loss of relationships, long-time marriages, loss of income, deep interruptions in trust to their country, to their nation, our military, our first-line responders, our doctors, our nurses, school dads and school moms and governors and senators and congressmen. We do not even know what our country means to us right now. The Dharma alchemy of dealing with this epic sense of betrayal, if you will, to the Constitution, betrayal to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You could call it natural based upon delusion, but right now many of us are dealing with epic forms of betrayal and abandonment and isolation and struggle and deep forms of loss and grieving and despair and epic depression. And look at all the suicides that are happening. Look at the abandonment. Look at the abandonment of the decency just in America today. And within it, yes, 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 people are rising up in uniformity. But will we be victorious? The war is on, not just for your arm and for your biology and an experimental so-called gene therapy, but the war is on for your desire to be a free human being born into a culture where men and women fought good battles, revolutions, to keep alive the radiance of a constitution and a declaration of human rights and a democratic oath of civility, to your role as an elected leader to abide by the will of the people. And here we are being incarcerated by the people that we put in power. Medical tyranny, financial tyranny, social tyranny, political tyranny, religious tyranny. Is it a real war on freedom right now? There's reason to despair. There's reason to alchemize. Reason to alchemize. And I ask you to invite me, to invite your friends to rise up. Yes, your partner has left you. Yes, you're in a foreign city dealing with foreign people that you don't know well. None of us know where we're going. None of us know that we can even trust getting a passport renewed without rolling up our arms and submitting to the tyranny of something that may not just harm you, it may kill you. I don't want to get off on a scream or a rant here, but I've been diagnosed with what's called a fatal heart disease. If I don't get instantaneous surgery, cutting a 10 to 14 inch scar right down the middle of my chest and my sternum, and people tell me, why don't you just get the surgery? Well, why don't you just get fucked? The adverse effects are one thing, but the catastrophic downside of this surgery is so radical, much less a vaccine. Blood clots are bad. A heart attack is worse. Dying on a fucking gurney, dying on an operating table, 25% of your cognitive functions are lost potentially. A second aneurysm, a third aneurysm within 2 to 4 years. Heart attacks, kidney failures. There's so many adverse effects based upon everything, right? And how to alchemize this. It's a whole other topic. But right now, all of us are fighting in many ways, not just for our sanity, our sovereignty, our right to determination of our lives and our children's lives and our families' lives, and our participation as citizens of the world in our own countries as well, as being active citizens in America, in the European Union, in England, in Australia, in Canada. Push back, fight back to government overreach. The loss and grieving hurt. I've never been down more on my knees wanting to commit a kind of existential suicide. The loss of my beloved country in Burma, and I think of my brothers and sisters in that country, my dear friend U Win Taint and Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, thrown under the bus by the corporate media and many leaders and artists worldwide. And there they sit in these undisclosed locations in a terrorist nation known as Burma, by a terrorist leader known by Ming Online that's identical to Pol Pot. And they're in prison and tortured. Some of them are being raped. And the despair of that, the epic anguish. And I know some of these people very well. They have tremendous courage to be a revolutionary of conscience. They knew, how many of them I talked to, they knew that by embarking on the path of revolutionary democratic change within a totalitarian system, Daw Aung San Suu Kyi was warned by her mentor, U Chi Mung and U Tien U, Young Suu, you will end up in prison to embark upon the revolutionary action of bringing democracy to this tyranny of totalitarianism in this country. It will be a slow road, not in your lifetime. And where she is, after 17 years of incarceration, the world does not even know where this heroic Nobel laureate sits and walks and eats and sleeps right now in the world, facing over 102 years of imprisonment based upon lies, that level of collective betrayal, the loss of the individual. So I bring this up because I think in the evolutional arc of my own Dharma alchemy, my own meditative, intelligent quest to be more liberated, I've gone from naivete to trauma to the wisdom of renunciation, just to explore what I don't know about myself. I mean, it's one thing to engage in the tantrification of intimacy. For me, sacred celibacy has been equally a very illuminating occupation to understand unrecognized conditions with the woman as a heterosexual. Just like fasting can reveal the patterns of eating and consumption. Just like fasting from speech can illuminate the patterns of communication and silence. Self-psychotherapy here. But here in this particular case, Dharma alchemy, going from ordinary human behavior into transformational, transcendent Dharma alchemy. That is the invitation at every level for me of the perception of dukkha. Wherever I feel pain, the Dharma mind says, you know, thank you very much. I don't want to associate with you ever again. You're not to be trusted. But I want to learn to trust myself, not only trust myself, but have more and more wisdom about myself. Not just trust myself, but more and more wisdom about myself to understand the machinations, the intelligences of self-directed freedom from fear, greed, delusion, denial, deception, and the evolutional opposite, which is the elevation of love, compassion, empathy, patience, determination. Cannot emphasize enough. EC, ethical courage. MC, moral courage. The willingness to restrain from the habit of deception. Narcissists out there, the willingness to restrain from the toxic joy of entrapment. Narcissists out there. So I will close. Maybe I'll continue this tomorrow. I hope you have a beautiful day. Just to reiterate some of the key points. Today is part 4 in this series. Loss and despair and grieving, the naturalness of that. It's human, needless to say, to empower it as human and to erode and take self-blame and alchemize self-blame, overcome that fatigue, that lack of oxygen, and increase, how can I learn? What are the elements of where I overextended here? Where did I under-engage? How could I be more intelligent? What can I learn from this encounter? That's the only salvation from depression. What can I learn from the mistake that was important to make? A mistake that's important to make. Yes. That's the role of the Bodhisattva. That's the Bodhisattvic spirit, is I'm alive. I'm going to make good on the promise of my adrenaline, my passions, my humanness, my karma, my unexplained conditions that give me this unique proclivity to hurt and to cry, unlike other people who don't cry and hurt at the times that I hurt and cry. Why is this architecture so unique to me? And get over the comparison in the mirror of what I'm not in relationship to the expectations of what I hope to be. That gap, minimize, transform, bring that mirror upon your beauty, not on your deficits. And elevate, evolve, consecrate, illuminate. Whatever you need to do to anoint the transformational fabric of developing spiritual radiance, spiritual intelligence, moral intelligence, ethical wisdom. Rise up in your Dharma alchemy. Write down your 4 noble truths of alchemy. What are the key ingredients to transform that darkness into light? The Buddha said there are 4 types of people that he could see. There are those who run from darkness into darkness, from despair into more despair, from separation into addiction and the catastrophic fall into suicide, from darkness to darkness, from brightness to darkness. Those who have privilege and power and status and wealth and health and happiness and good parents, and for whatever reason they get snared, caught, trapped by pride and prejudice and power and arrogance and domination, and all of a sudden they get elected based upon the finesse of manipulating this and that. And they create false narratives and manufacture false forms of consent, and they manipulate the media and their team of people, and all of a sudden you've got a bogus congressman, a faux senator, a sold out Speaker of the House, whatever it may be, and all of a sudden that person from brightness goes to darkness and declares a never-ending, enduring war called stock options in all the 10 biggest high-tech weapons industries. Thank you very much, CEO. Let's play golf on Sunday. We don't want those type of people leading the country. We don't want those type of people being in our country. But we want to learn the conscious way to help rehabilitate. And we don't want to fall victim to those types of psychologies or emotions in ourselves. What would I give for a minute to be able to have a face-to-face with Ming Online in Naypyidaw? Bill Richardson, you did it. I spent 44 years in Myanmar. Ming Online invite me and to protect me and guarantee my safety and to hear me as friend of country, of Dhamma, of ethnicities, of Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, and even you. Allow me to speak with you and I will listen to you without comment. Grant me the privilege of flying me into Naypyidaw. I need no red carpet. I just simply want a few hours with you, sir, and see if I can get through to your mind and your conscience, yes? If I were Ming Online, I would want someone speaking to me in the way that I'm speaking to you, sir. It's just simply the power of dialogue. That's all that Daw Aung San Suu Kyi and the President U Win Myint want. And you've got this need to go from darkness to darkness. You don't understand a basic tenet of the very religion that you were brought up in. The Dhamma. The word Dhamma, the Dhamma power. I want to end here. Learn to develop. What's the word? The Buddhist word. Sankhara. Cognitive formations of transformational awakening. Cognitive formations of luminous states of mind. Dharma Alchemy. The wisdom sankharas. Constellations of emotions. Sankhara. Constellations of cognitive energies that are psychedelicized with love and empathy and compassion. The Buddha gave us a sangha of sisters and brothers that travel through eternity, anointed by the familiarity of the fabric of Dhamma. It's not a concept alone. It's a state of being, it's an energy, it's an oxygen, it's a blood. It is nutrient of wisdom that leads to the radiance of freedom. And its beauty is that we can talk about it, we can communicate it, we can create synergistic patterns of shared transformational space. If only we learn the poetry and the theater, the transacting called naturalness of Dhamma alchemy, to even deal with the enemy called Ming Online. All Daw Aung San Suu Kyi wanted to do with you, sir, and U Win Myint and U Win Tain and every other elected leader in that country who's a civilian in those few military that you've been appointed by your bogus 2008 military-induced Tan Shui constitution, all they want to do is talk. All they want to do is support the will of the people who want to even include you as aberrant dark brother and sister. They don't want to throw you under the bus. So Dharma Alchemy has so many different things. How to reverse the perception of loss to victory. Yes, you rejected me. Guess what? I'm not going to reject me. I'm learning from the experience. I am learning from the experience. How many times do I have to say that to really take it to heart? Learning means a vocation of Dharma alchemy. Brightness to brightness. Not just brightness stationary to brightness. We are warriors, sisters and brothers in a revolution of God. Many of you know that I've spoken about, and I'm going to dive more into it over the coming months. I'm writing a film called Raw War. And it's going to be my literary, cinematic kind of musical revolution of art. My humble attempt, should I live, a revolutionary piece of sonic art to radiate the power of Dharma Alchemy even to you, Ming Online, even to you, Joseph Biden, even to you, Anthony Fauci, even to you, Davos, even to you, Mark, even to you, anyone in the history of existence, whoever is embedded as a dark angel in there. And I don't exclude myself from having residues of struggle and complexity and delusion. But we're in a revolution today. And so those of you who are grieving in depression or suicidal or in despair of loss, please turn it around. Empower your bodhisattvic spirit. No matter where you are, you're not in a prison cell like our friends in Burma. And they're keeping revolutionary spirit alive. All the political prisoners around the world are keeping revolutionary experience, heart energy alive. Even in, I've interviewed them, even in their screams of torment, they're not abandoning the revolution of the human heart. Lightwalkers. Should I forget, remind me. Should you forget, be reminded. We're in this together. And may our losses be minimal. May our despairs in grieving be anointed with the sacredness of revolutionary wisdom. And may we rise up in the power of freedom long after our legacies are buried deep in the ground of forgetfulness. May new generations birth on this planet and in this cosmos and in parallel universes, wherever they may be. And may the radiance of freedom, whatever it means in its highest luminosity, turn back this darkness. May the entire eternity of all dimensions and all beings and all spheres of existence move from the darkness to the light and eventually evolve the brightness into a form of brightness never before known, to create a circumstance, a context inside and out for all beings everywhere to enjoy the safety and the sacredness of freedom. Isn't that the Bodhisattvic spirit? So from my heart to yours, have a beautiful day. God willing, see you tomorrow. And thank you, thank you, thank you.